division for all 64 county assessors throughout the state of Colorado had that opportunity to see many a trend, downward as well as upward, not so much as now. So you'll hear a little bit more that this is one of the most extreme trends in the 25 plus years I've been part of this industry, and you probably felt it as well. And so that's something that we'll talk about toward the end. Is what time trending is one of the adjustments, and we'll get into that a little bit more. So I also had the opportunity, the Division of Property Taxation's, their duty and statutory obligation is to aid and assist and educate all assessors and staff. I had the opportunity to be an education coordinator there as well. And that opportunity gave me a chance to instruct as well as coordinate all the different sessions that we had on appraisal. And so just keep that in mind. If you have any questions about all this fun stuff, even if we can't get to it because of time constraints, we're here afterward for a little bit of time before we get kicked out for another opportunity that's going to come up. So we'll do best we can. And we also have cards, brochures, and all sorts of information. You can contact us after the fact with any specific questions. This is a general overview, 45 minutes worth of fun and excitement, followed by Q&A, hopefully 15 to 20 minutes of Q&A, and then packing up and moving on for the next party that comes in. So heads up for that. So once again, we're going to go ahead and look at real property assessment and focus on the residential real property assessment. So what does the assessor actually do? Statutorily, the assessor is responsible for discovering, listing, classifying, and valuing all property. Notice collecting is not part of that. We leave that fund for the treasurer. Okay, we actually establish the value that becomes the basis for the various elements and variables that come up to the property tax bill in the end. So what we have control over is making sure we have the best information by constantly keeping up with sales that are occurring throughout the market. We have the control over making sure we list and capture all property that is out there, taxable and exempt throughout the Boulder County. And then classifying is a big part. Real versus personal, taxable versus exempt, residential improved versus vacant land, oil and gas, natural resources, all that good stuff, and add it back into commercial, industrial, warehouse, commercial office, hotel, motel. And because of COVID, we've had a lot of opportunity to take another analysis and review of all the ways that these have been impacted by COVID and by interest rates, by all the variables that are going on out there. And so we've made a look at that. We are still statutorily obligated and required by Constitution, statute, and court case law and manuals that I used to help create from the division to follow appraisal procedures, mass appraisal, and also to specifically look at statistical compliance. Every year there's an audit, independent audit, where the State Board of Equalization looks to Legislative Council and says, we want to make sure all 64 county assessors are treating their taxpayers right. They're following the appropriate procedures, and they're in statistical compliance as well. Mass appraisal isn't specific property where this is absolutely right, absolutely wrong. Even individual fee appraisals are a range of acceptable values. Okay, so it can fit anywhere in there. Now, mass appraisal, we look at individuals and then we break it out further and have to make a assumption a little bit that this is representative of sold and unsold properties that are comparable or similar. And so keep that in mind. It's imperfect. The appeal process is a way to correct it. And we always have data collection through our website, or anytime someone wants to call our office, provide an email, all sorts of ways you can correct your records, double check online. There's a great electronic digital world that helps us out because we can't meet with every single individual, and every single individual does not want to meet with us. Reality. So there we go. So those are the duties of the assessor. One of our main sources of information and data collection is the TD1000. It's the transfer document that is signed at closing between the seller and the buyer and all the hopefully knowledgeable parties to the transaction. It's a public document, except it's confidential, meaning it's required to be filled out with potentially a $25 to 1% of total value exchange, which we don't actually apply, but once it's filled out, it's between us and the parties that have signed it. Confidential document, for requests and so forth, you can't access it. It has to be one of those situations where specifically we want the honesty. We want everybody to give us as much information on what transaction and what was in part of that transaction. And so that's a big part of us getting best data to make sure we have qualified, verified arm's length transaction sales, which is the basis for valuation. So hopefully with this document, people have declared the appropriate personal property that was transacted. Everything has personal property except for vacant land. Sometimes that does too. A tractor may be left on the property. But most things have personal property transacted. You sell a residential property. Most of the time there's appliances, right? You may have specific stove, standard, refrigerator, or anything like that that's inclusive. And if in the market that is inclusive, that's considered a part of the personal property that should not be included within a real property only valuation. So we ask in TD1000, if you have anything above what's standardly included in this type of transaction, this type of home, this type of market, list it there. Tell us what it is. Tell us the approximate value that you have for that. It can be cost to you. It can be estimated value in use or value in exchange. We want to stick away from value in use because it's subjective. Value in exchange, what could someone buy a comparable property like that in the open market? That's another thing we look at. Condition of the property. When you bought it, what condition was in it? You could say it's really poor. It's terrible condition, need a lot of work, deferred maintenance. Okay, how does that compare to the other properties selling in your neighborhood in that market? Because if all of them are, that's representative of that market. Okay, so, and once again, there's subjectivity. Is mine's deferred? Is it not? What's standard? What's not? There's a value in use to have a new roof. Okay, hopefully we don't have to find out with the potential weather coming through about a deduction with the storms that are predicted, and hopefully no one has any issues with that when we get back. But that's something that we can't interpret, we can't jump into. We have to look at specific sales to interpret how that represents the market. We always look at that. So condition as of January 1st is going to dictate, but when you have the sale, we want to know the condition as of that date compared to the market. When we look at the actual valuation, we also come back to the assessment date. We have a nice little graph that we'll talk about there. Contact information. It's vital that we have contact information of the buyer and the seller. And who is most going to be liable for those taxes going forward? The buyer. So the buyer, it's in their vested interest to go ahead and make sure that this is filled out completely, and we're going to follow up with them. We have a sales confirmation program for our appraisers. When the sales are happening, as soon as we know they have happened, we get on that and call the parties involved. We ask them as much as possible. Mass appraisers, there's so many, it may take a little delay. So depends on staff and all that good stuff, variables we can't control. But as soon as possible, we have that. We have accounts managed by specific appraisers, and they hopefully know the market better because they stick to those accounts. And so it gives us that opportunity for people to actually know the market, understand the market, talk to the people in the market, and go ahead and witness and monitor changes in transactions within markets. And so we try to make it comparable with that. So that contact information, sales confirmation, always going on. As long as sales are going on, we're trying to follow up with those people who have purchased or sold properties to get the best information available. And we have penalties, they are, once $25 or I think 0.1% based on the sale price, can be collected. 25 at the max. Our office does not collect that. It's a minute amount. We want honesty, we want information. We hope that people see in their vested interest to go ahead and give us that information as timely as possible. If not, we have something called BIA, best information available, and we may have to go back to that. And we can also compare against what else we've received from other parties in similar markets to say, really, this is typically $10,000 of personal property. Outside of what's standard here is included when you have this type of upgrade or what the case may be. So we have to make some subjective opinions as well within the various stages. So there's a human element to every single phase of this. So keep that in mind. When there's a human element, this is subjectivity, which yields to some inconsistency. Okay, so imperfect, mass appraisal, individuals, hopefully getting the best information throughout the process, making judgment calls when it comes to what influences and what doesn't, giving that to our modeler as to what potentially can influence values. And then we can statistically check to see if it truly does show with 30 or more sales of comparable properties with that similarity or dissimilarity. Does it truly influence the market statistically, reasonably? And if it does, how much? Okay, so that's one of the big things we do. Mass, looking at individuals to start, pulling that into mass, and then coming back to actual value individual. Okay, a lot of places where there's variables, there's inconsistencies, there's things we have to try to manage within limited resources. Okay, then penalties, once again, not, and then there's a specific TD1000 video. My old boss, the PTA, Property Tax Administrator for the Division of Property Taxation, this link that takes you right to it. It's very exciting, this tape. It wasn't my monotone voice, but it's someone else's monotone voice. that goes ahead and introduces you to this wonderful document and goes line by line, what's expected, what's needed, and how it helps you, and how it helps our appraisers in our office. So if you want that excitement, we're not going to go through that right now. If you have questions and you want to go ahead and do that, I can always go through and I can show you that. I can answer any questions you really have if you're still awake. So there we go. So real property transfer declaration, once again, we're looking for what's atypical for the market, the property in the market. And we're looking for explanations of the high and low outside, things extraordinary. One thing we do is ratio studies. So when you ratio studies, you look at all the properties, the potential characteristics within a neighborhood that are comparable, and we say, what's the differences? Within the differences, if we had 30 or more sales, statistically reasonable and supportable, we can measure whether there's a 80% chance, 20% chance, 10% chance it influences market value. And then we can actually measure approximately how much influence it has. Time trending, market conditions over time, which everyone's going to have questions about, because that's the big thing about this reappraisal. When something goes up 35% average and potentially up to 70% in mountain counties, values increasing that much from the last reappraisal cycle. That's going to cause concerns. And so we understand that, we're empathetic, we are still bound by the Constitution, statutes, court case law, manuals, division policies as published in the manuals. So we still have to follow that, and we're audited independently by a third party contract by the state, analyzing all 64 Colorado counties to make sure that they're doing it procedurally and statistically correct. And I have the fun of being the main person dealing with the audit. So I'm still providing great information, having exchanges with the state auditor to make sure that we're in compliance. And it's very important, and we'll get to it later, why it's so important that we're in compliance, not just fair and equitable, but cost to the county if you're not. So this is the TD1000. I don't expect you to be able to see it. It's online, you can always do that, and I already went over the basic parts that you need to know. And more important than the first page or the second page is the bottom part of the second page. Buyer, seller, contact information. Because within that document, so many documents fly in a closing. Sign here, sign here, sign here, sign here. Many do not have an idea of what they sign. This is important for the realtor, people involved in the transaction, the professionals, to understand how important this document is in the big picture, in the process, to help their client, not just then, but all people with comparable properties throughout the 2-year reappraisal cycle. So make sure that that's always filled out. Follow-up can be done. Make sure we get the best information for a market transaction. A market transaction isn't just a sale. It's a sale where you have a willing buyer and seller, both knowledgeable, acting in their own best interests, and agreeing to a contract they're bound by legally. Okay, these are components of an arm's length transaction. If you sell to your brother, your sister, could it be an arm's length transaction? Potentially, but it may be a little biased, a little favorable. So we look at that. We have actually a list of disqualifying reasons that we look at sales and may remove them from our data before we come up with valuations and adjustments. Okay, so we have a whole list, and to do that though, we have to actually disqualify them based on a code the state gives us. We can't just say, I don't like that one, it's not going to my value. Oh, that's too low, I would have paid more or paid less. We actually have to look at it reasonably. Is there a reason it's not? And we want to keep everything qualified unless disqualified. Like you're innocent until proven guilty. Remember that with our office. We're innocent until proven guilty. Okay, so if you have any discrepancies or whatever, we work with you and make sure that we resolve those as soon as possible. So classification. What types of classifications do we have and substratifications do we have? The first one is residential real property. It includes residential land and improvements. And it proves the land and improvements which we have statutorily defined as parcels contiguous under common ownership, which residential improvements are located and used in conjunction with the improvements themselves, which improvements is buildings. People hear improvements, oh, that's not an improvement. It's a building or structure, which we call it improvements. It statutorily captures that, so we have to pull it forward. Okay, it doesn't add value, it's not an improvement. Yes, it is. It's part of the market, part of what's going on, what you're paying for. The residential improvements and the portion of building are designed for use as a residence. Is the camper shell a residence? Most likely not. Have we heard case law or people argue it? Yes. Okay, why would you argue that a camper shell is a residential structure? There is something called a favorable assessment rate. If you're non-residential, you have different assessment rates will which may actually impact your taxes that you have to pay. Okay. If you're not, agriculture has a favorable type of valuation. It's basically not the value side, it's the rate. It's the ag rate, which is 13%, is what you apply, and it's the income approach. So there's different things. Depending on the substratification of property, there's a lot of things. But we're going to focus on residential. Residential versus everything else. Residential has a lower rate, has had a lower rate throughout since 82. Okay, people have heard of Gallagher and Tabor and all the fun stuff like that. People argue and disagree as to what impact they have. Do they have an impact? Yes. Is it positive or negative? Depends on who you ask. A lot of times it depends on their own personal impact or their own political affiliation or thought process as to how things play. That's just human nature. It's what you're close to. Okay. We have excellent articles as to what they are. Just to let you know, the annual report for the Division of Property Taxation captures all the way going back to the 70s and how that's changed. Essentially, what Tabor is, or not Tabor, what the Gallagher did was basically you have a 45% on residential burden and a 55% approximately on everything else. Okay, so that may or may not impact your value, your end bill. It won't impact your value. Okay, it's not even considered within our valuation. It's a secondary part like mill levies. The mill levies, and then you have the assessment rate. Assessment rate is legislative. Mill levies is local taxing entities. Valuation is our office. Okay. Okay. The power. Electricity coming on up here. All right, so that's what we have there. Once again, the classification and the condition are decided on the assessment date each year. January 1st of every year is a new assessment date. The appraisal date is similar for 2-year cycles, but the assessment date is every year. So we'll talk a little bit about that when I have a graph up that helps explain it. I talked about the mill levy. I talked about the assessment rate. It used to be simply residential was 1, commercial was 29%. Any of the others, even ag, was 29% assessment rate. Some valuation differences between different substratifications of property were there. But when the Gallagher Amendment repeal and other adjustments were being made, they shifted this to all these lovely substratifications by 1% or 2% or whatever the percentages are. You don't have to worry about this. This is something that we capture on our website, right? We have on our website. We also have other information. I think at the end of this, we'll give out potentially PDF version, so you don't have to like scramble to make sure you write everything unless you really want to. Don't expect you to see that, but just to show you and illustrate all the different substratifications of property and how they may have different assessment rates, which can impact your total tax bill. Legislatively dictated, controlled, going away with the actually repealing the Gallagher, put this more in control of the legislature as to what they decide that is. They still get the studies from the Colorado Division of Property Taxation for assessed value and information to consider, but they are no longer bound by the 45-55% breakout. Okay, maintaining data. This is part of what, once again, we do. So we have to go ahead and look at currently 127,000 taxable real properties, which right now, once again, always in flux as to how things change. 8,600 taxable business personal properties, and as the exempt amounts as well. So approximate value that we're looking at is 91 billion of actual value. That's before the assessment rate is applied to the properties. And then after the assessment rate has been applied, substratification based, we estimate 9.4 billion assessed value. And that serves as the basis for an abstract information we give to the state, which then helps us, after certified, come back around and determine actual taxes that people receive the tax bill for and have to pay the next year. And that's the confusing thing, the back and forth with the appraisal date, the assessment date, and the payment date. That really throws a lot of people off. The reason we have to go backwards for this, it's the only way you can get the data. You have to collect data throughout a 2-year cycle or even more sometimes. And the only way you can keep up with this is you have to have administration time to check the sales, to keep up with the permits, to put this information into a model to come up with how it impacts value. There's a lot of things. That's why we have to go back at least 6 months and potentially 18 months to that appraisal date to make sure we have the best data, capture the best information to come up with the best, most reliable, supportable values. Mass appraisal, I say between single property and mass. A lot of people think it's a magical algorithm, it's wizardry, it's someone who doesn't like me at the county assessor's office give me a higher value to pay higher taxes. and they have some kind of benefit and bonus where they get a little check to go ahead and get that percentage increase. Comes up, it doesn't happen that way. Okay, just to let you know, it never does. And there is actually, while this is madness, yet there is method in it, Shakespeare would put it. Okay, so we have to actually look at that and consider that. So mass appraisal is the process of valuing a universe of properties as of a given date using standard methodology, employing common data, and allowing for statistical testing. USPAP is the standards and ethics on all appraisers and mass. So it's a requirement based on standards and ethics, and that's the definition of mass appraisal. So within that, one of the methods and statistical testing methodologies is modeling. Okay, so a model is created based on qualified verified sales from the market, arm's length transaction, willing buyer and seller acting in their own best interest. That's the assumption, unless proven different. And then we're looking into using standard statistical analyses to determine characteristics, properties that are value drivers for sales. So every sale, we have to value all sold and unsold properties every year. Have to value this every year. Not every property sells every year. So we have to say that the sampling that does sell represents all sold and unsold properties. That's how we're going to come around to figure out in mass appraisal how we can value everything for taxation purposes. And so that's the best we can do. So with models, it's not just simply an algorithm. There are people elements at every level, from getting the appropriate permits, making sure those updated timely, to going through getting the sales information, TG1000 deeds as they transition, to coming all making sure that we capture the best information, going field inspections, field audits, talking to taxpayers, opening our website to see what people have added and changed and adjusted. Was it 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms? Oh no, it's 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. Oh well, no, it's one less. Correct the records. You can do that anytime on our website. So we do the best we can to capture it all, but there's a human element. Okay, hopefully not too much subjectivity with some of that. We capture the best we can. And so we look at that. The models are created based upon statistical analysis. Who loves math? Okay, math and statistics. Everybody loves math and statistics. Come on, raise those hands. Okay, well, modeling is based upon statistical analysis. A statistical analysis is based on ratios. A ratio is simply something compared to something else. What's the relationship? And in this case, for time trending, we're taking the relationship between the previous assessed value, the previous actual value we had. So back to June 30th of 2020, we set the values. Notices the value went out. Everybody had the chance to appeal, correct the records and everything else. And therefore, that set the market. That last June 30th, 2020, set the residential market for the last reappraisal cycle. Now we're in a reappraisal year. Every odd year is a reappraisal year. So now we're looking at moving that 2-year period up. It moved up to June 30th of 2022. So between June 20th, 2020, or July 1st, I have to say, and June 30th, 2022, what happened within the market? A lot of things, boom, 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 boom. Right now, it's stagnating a little bit. Some areas still doing okay, but the sales are less. You ask anyone in the market, I know you know, the sales have decreased, longer time on the market, right? And not many people overbidding the asking price. So with that kind of change, that actually influences how values stagnate or go up. I would have to say most markets I've analyzed, including where I live, it's stagnation at this point and delay rather than significant drop. Okay, so with that being the case though, if it's the peak of the market, June 30th, 2022, people will argue, peak of the market, it's still going down a little bit slightly or decreasing the amount of data to show us a difference, which leads us to the end result. We use the best information, hopefully come up with the best answer, but it's never perfect. Count on the taxpayers to come in and correct the records, give us information, appeal, provide documentation so that we can actually come up with even better if it's not mirroring what the market says, what you believe your property's worth. Okay. People have different ideas of what property's worth depending on the purpose. For taxation, we like it here. For resale, we like it here. For purchasing, we like it. Yeah, so, but we can't control that part of it. We can control monitoring and make sure it's best data to make the best conclusions that represents all the sold and unsold properties throughout Colorado, Boulder, and hopefully Colorado, other 63 counties do the same thing. We're not worrying about them. I used to, but I don't anymore. So models are actually built into that. And they're value drivers. This is also a place where we take individual characteristics. We could take time, market conditions, versus the actual value we had last time, which hopefully represented market when all the appeals were over. whatever value you had. So if that property sold within the data collection period, we'll look at our actual value from the last time. June 30th, 2020, what did we have on that property? What value was that? If it was incorrect at the time, the taxpayer could have come in. A lot of things could have been done. We're assuming through that process, they agreed. They believe it is market. Now that property sells within the data collection period. That is a sale price representative of market. If it's arm's length transaction, and we looked at the sales confirmation, and it seemed like there's no reason to disqualify. So all those sales that happen within the data collection period are measured against the previous value we have in our system. If it's a perfect, not changing market, you have $500,000 that you were valued last time. No changes have occurred. Should be pretty close to $500,000 sale that had occurred within data collection period. Doesn't always happen that way, right? So what we've seen within these ratios, if they're going upward with that relationship, it's showing a trend over the data collection period toward that direction. We have a spline trend sometimes. It goes up, cuts back down, it goes back up. Nice little W, U, however you want to look at it. And that's part of that as well. So we have to look at the market. The market, we don't tell the market tells us. Okay, so there's that whole part of that. So we want to keep that in mind. So what are the drivers? What are the characteristics? What adds and detracts? A lot of people come in and say, specific to my property, well, I have a little patio. Okay, that patio is wonderful and it increased my property, or the other person had one, therefore their property's better. Okay, so you have arguments one way or the other. And they'll say, okay, well, I just refurbished my living room. Okay, that's a beautiful thing. Sometimes those characteristics don't influence the actual value, they influence the marketability. So a lot of people, I did this, that, and the other. And I always like to tell people, my ex-wife, the reason she's the ex, but ex-wife, had to satisfy her by investing at least $6,000 every 6 months in something. I said, well, not consumable, let's go back into value and use. Value and exchange is what people pay for. Value and use is the pleasure and privilege you pay for something you want it the way you want it. So what I would do, she wanted to give a new washer dryer, industrial. One industrial came closer to the $6,000. Okay, I went ahead and said, okay, what else? We're not at the 6,000 yet. So she said water softener. Not typical in our neighborhood. Nice, beautiful water softener. Okay, never really learned how to use it, but it was there. It was physically there, paid for, a beautiful part of the property. And so there are atypical things we did, new appliances compared to other things within our neighborhood. Okay, we remodeled the whole bathroom. Most properties did not. We were a nicer property in a lesser neighborhood. So as a purchaser, people would go in and say, okay, I like this property, I love it, but I see one over here. This one is, 450,000. You're asking 470,000. Is that worth 20,000? The difference is to me as a buyer. If the market will not pay it, it's not worth it. It may be a selling point where it's like they're comparable prices. I will buy this because I like it better than this and what it offers me. So value and use enters that. We're looking at market value. Is a hot tub or pool worth more or less? Looks at the market, right? Depends on the market. If you're up in Steamboat Springs, potentially they want that individual pool or enclosed hot tub area. Other people say, what? Oh, another expense to maintain. I don't want that. And so it depends. So we have to measure the market. What most people represented within the sales have actually acknowledged and paid. That's an important part. Is there subjectivity in that? Yes. The appraisers come up with what's the consistencies to capture that information, look at the differences in prices paid, and one of the variables is time, market conditions over time. So we have to cut back and say, well, is that reasonable? Is it indicative, and how much? So statistics help us with that, but the human element is throughout the process. Algorithm is almost like a human part removed. It's just a magical step-by-step voodoo kind of thing, however you want to look at it, where no one understands it, and somehow my values are higher, my taxes are higher. That's how it's perceived and brought up. Well, we don't just use an algorithm. We have a model that works at least 8 months a year to make sure she keeps in contact with the appraisers, the office, the market participants to find out what really is there, or did our data capture what's really there? And then it helps us to measure. We can go an extra garage, extra enclosed or separate garage. If we capture that within the system and we have comparable properties that have and do not have, we can measure statistically with 30 or more sales that have that difference, but there in fact has a statistical reliability that it does make a difference, and approximately how much difference. So common valuation considerations: location, 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 location. We already know that. Land and building characteristics, property condition as of the January 1st assessment date. Okay, we want the information TD1000 as of the date they purchased compared to other properties. But when we value, we say as of January 1st, 2021, or sorry, 2023, I'm years behind, 2023, as it sat, what was the condition and does it impact value? The classification is use as of January 1st, 2023. But the evaluation date is June 30th, 2020. So as it sat here, what would have been worth here? And that's the problem we're trying to solve. So sales confirmation, I already mentioned that, constantly going on. Sales are constantly going on. Our staff is always looking out there for permits and sales, capturing it within each property that's selling, and verifying with the owners or whoever we can contact part of that transaction to get the best information we can. And we disqualify those that don't fit. We want just the market transactions. Data exploration, we look at there, is it comparable to other neighborhood properties? What's the differences, similarities? Did we capture in our system? We explore the data to figure out how that impacts value. Market adjustments, any other property adjustments that may take place. Once again, pros and cons. If you have a new renewable system on your property, does it add or detract? Well, it's considered personal property right now. Renewable energy, you have solar panels. Now go back into the 70s and you have the heating panels versus the electrical producing panels. Would a 1970s solar panel system for heating add or detract? If you have enough, you can determine. If not, probably doesn't even get considered beyond that initial phase. And so just keep that in mind. So any property characteristics and potential adjustments have to be captured from the get-go within the sales confirmation process. And if we capture enough consistently, we use statistics to help it determine the new values. So like I explained, the sales confirmation market transactions, specifically ratios over time, every single characteristic that adds and detracts from value has the potential can have that same analysis done. Same ratios, high, low, does it detract how much on a monthly basis? Multiple regression analysis is what we do, mass appraisal. Looks at all of the different variables we've captured and the different sale prices, and we look at how it impacts, and it measures percentage likelihood that it impacts, and then how much amount. It helps us discern between not overlapping and doubling up, trying to really get those characteristics and decide how that's going to fit. End result, at the end, we time trend if necessary, time adjusted sell price. It's tested against our values that we set to get us to compliance or not compliance. So instead of looking at the previous value now, we're saying the value we determined is now the value. That's the market value. We compare that against specific information with a time adjustment. So if a time adjustment is warranted, we say time adjusted sell price versus the value we placed on it. And those sales that have occurred tell us if we're statistically in compliance. It's called performance evaluation analysis. And that's what the auditor looks at us for. We proactively do it ourselves because it's the right thing to do. I'm running out of time a little bit. So I'll go time trend. This is an example of the ratio study. Each of the little dots represents a ratio. And that'd be like sell price compared to actual value that we have. And so this is how it's graphed. One specific characteristic. All the various characteristics break out the same way. And basically it shows you high and low. This is increasing trend. And then we look at total increase and break it out on a per month basis throughout data collection period. So if your property sold in January, you'd have like 6 months going back, January of 2022. And you'd have it right here and you say, how much has it gone from this to here? And you block it. And this is how much it do. So we do that in mass, not individual, but mass to say how much does the market tell us is going on with that. I actually have a wonderful tape if you love it. I have a tape from when I was with the Division of Property Taxation where I go in minute detail about this exciting stuff I know you guys just can't wait to hear more about. So if you have that, I'll be happy to give you the link, and you can see me with a nice yellow shirt talking all through years younger, 2018. Yeah, look the same. All right, well, a little less here, a little more here, but same essential. All right, so why do we do it? We have to consider it because it's required by law. The auditor audits us. It's the best way to do it to make sure we have uniform and equitable values for our taxpayers. And then we're audited by the state, and increase and decrease in values over time is measured by specifically the time trend and adjust to the June 30th appraisal date every 2 years. This is the calendar I was talking about, data collection period. For this last time around, it's June 1st, 2020 to July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2022, we can go as far back as 6 years, or 5 years, which is 60 months. But we don't, we capture a 2-year cycle, seasonality. Hopefully it overcomes the seasonality impact. You have to go at least 18 months back based on audit. And so it looks at this. So basic, just real quick, 24-month data collection period. This is where the sales come from. This is what we're measuring for attributes, contributory value, measure whether they even impact anything. But then as of January 1st assessment date and January 1st of 2023 and 2024, we look at the condition and use. Condition tells us potential valuation impact. And then you have the use captures the classification. That's what we do. So anyway, this is what we're looking at, reappraisal year. Using that data, come with the value as the property sat here. And this is where they get the information, NOV. And now notice the determination after June 8th this year. People can protest at this time, and that's, I think Cindy will hit it real quick. And then intervening year, we're going to start with the same base, except for use and condition here. And it won't, if there's something that changes, it'll change, and the appeal can be part of that change. So there's a lot of things outside our control. So this is basically data collection period. Qualified verified sales is the basis for valuation, the assessment dates, legal, use, and condition. Minimum, we have median sale ratio. Won't go into it right now because there's too much going on. Don't have a lot of time. Basically, median sale ratio tells us the ratios I was talking about, where does it center? So we don't go with the high outliers or low outliers. We look at the center. For time trending, any other analysis, it's what is the norm? The norm is set by the median, the number in between the high and the low. We look at median statistics. Central tendency is what we're looking at, then coefficient of dispersion. It measures the wideness of the high. So if you have the norm being here, how dispersed is it? How much high versus low ratios do you have? How much higher, how much atypical versus typical that you have? And PRD is price-related differential. It measures whether higher and lower value properties within the same subdivision and area are being treated fairly. If we fail, we owe. The county owes for a reappraisal order. We have to contract with the state or a subcontractor to come in and fix what we failed on. And so county has to pay that back. Reimbursement for any state expenses and any excess state aid to schools. We'd also have to make up the difference. So it behooves us not to fail. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Cindy, and hopefully I left her more than 5 minutes to talk. I apologize. Thank you.
Let's see if I can handle all this equipment. Ken used to teach week-long classes on this stuff, so he gets real wound up. So I'll try to be brief so that you guys have time for questions. Hopefully this doesn't fall off my ear. So this is a great chart that walks you through the appraisal, the appeal process. So May 1st this year, we sent out, and actually we sent them out April 28th because I wanted to make sure. I'm still a little unsure about the post office and how well they're delivering things. So we sent out notices of value to everybody. Most people got a postcard, and that saves the county. I know it's hard to read those postcards. I know that's hard, especially on people with vision issues, and I'm in that age group with vision issues, but it saves the county a whole lot of money. The full form, the full page form of the notice of valuation is on our website. It can be downloaded, printed off. We also are happy to mail those to people, email them to people if they call in. So May 1, we sent out these notices. A lot of people are in shock. Completely understand that. They have the right to appeal. This is part of a property owner's due process. They can appeal from May 1 through the end of day, June 8th. So if we get it postmarked June 8th, emailed to us or submitted electronically on our appeal tool on the web by 11:59 that night, they're considered timely. Anything that comes in after that point, we cannot consider. But there still is a way to get your value looked at, and we'll cover that here in a minute. We work on these appeals all summer. By the end of July, we have to start bundling things up to get them to a printer, and they get mailed out by August 15th every year, the notice of determination to anybody who appealed. Then on the back of the notice of determination are instructions on what to do next. So you do have the opportunity, if the property owner agent is not pleased with the result of their appeal, they can take it on to the County Board of Equalization. And at that, we are a expert witness. The property owner is an expert witness, and it's before a hearing officer. And those are all under the county commissioners. So they're not a process or a program that my office runs. That runs through September 15th to November 1st. And as soon as they can after November 1st, there's another notice of determination that comes out from the county board. If that decision that's rendered is still not satisfying or satisfactory, one can go on to higher levels. Within 30 days of receiving your notice of determination, you can choose to go to the Board of Assessment Appeals, which is a hearing type structure at the state level. You can choose binding arbitration, which is handled at the county, but it is before a hearing officer. Binding arbitration, whatever the answer is at the end of that hearing, is the final answer. You can't take the appeal any further. Or you can go to district court, and that is generally an attorney takes it on at that point. You're before a judge. So that's the basic schedule for the calendar for appeals. Whoops, wrong button. So this is just a quick overview. We accept appeals to end of day June 8th. If you are appealing a commercial property that's income producing, there is a requirement to supply us with income information by July 15th so that we understand, because with commercial properties, we are required to look at market cost and income methodologies evaluation, and we don't generally get income information in an appeal. So if they can send that to us by the 15th, it helps us get the value right. No later than August 15th, we'll send out the notice of determination. County board starts off on September 16th. They have a whole online process for not only submission of appeals, but for their hearings. So it's something that you can do in the comfort of your home or office. And then Board of Assessment Appeals is 30 days after county board has sent out their determinations. Again, both the county board and Board of Assessment now are doing all their hearings online on Zoom or Teams. Excuse me. We do work with people who have ADA type needs who need to be in an in-person hearing with, we do support that as well. So abatements. So you've gone through, you got your notice evaluation this year and you happen to be in Paris and you can't react quickly enough. You can't get your appeal in by June 8th, or you're ill, or you have just a busy life and you can't react quickly enough. If you don't appeal that year, you can file for an abatement after January 1st. And abatements allow you not only to do the year you missed, but 2 years back. So, but during those years, there's criteria. You have to qualify for the appeal. You can't have appealed for the same reason before. So you can most appeals come in and they're about value, but there can also be a clerical error, or there can be we have the tax area incorrect, classification error. So most of them come in as appeals. Most abatements happen because somebody missed the appeals and they want another look back, and it's called an abatement because your taxes have already been levied. So we're now looking at a refund of taxes through a reduction of value. So this comes into our office. The applications are available online. That information down here. We also have an online abatement submission program that just got kicked off this year. So you go online and fill out the form. And then the appraisers review them. If it's adjusted, they'll just work with the property owner or agent on the adjustment. If it's denied, it goes to a hearing. And the County Board of Equalization, again, sits for those hearings and has hearing officers. So it's just another way. So it's a very taxpayer-friendly system. So if you can't appeal in the given year that you get your notice, you can always do a look back and have it reviewed again. Some reasons to appeal, and there's lots of them. But the big ones are, I feel my value is incorrect. My property record is incorrect. And we put information about the property record, your bedroom count, your bathroom count, your square footage is all out on our website for review, but certainly you can call in and have the person on the phone or come in person and we'll review that with the property owner or with you. Classification, an example of incorrect classification. A couple years ago, we had someone come in, there'd been a home that had been built and it had over time been converted into a dentist's office. It got sold and the dentist office got turned back into a home, and we didn't realize that. We didn't know it had transitioned from commercial to residential again. So that is a reason to reach out to us. Another one is agricultural status. I've been farming this land for 4 or 5 years. You have me on as residential. So we would require some paperwork to show that you'd actually been farming, but that's a classification change. A condition that hasn't been considered. My dad lives here in the county. He's 94 years old. He's a very proud man, and he doesn't want us helping him. And his house has horrible condition issues. So he's not alone. I think as we get older, or if we have financial trouble, or whatever, our homes may suffer. And we do want to know about that, because we only know what we can see from the street, what we see in public records, or what somebody tells us. So we want people to come in and let us know, gee, I've got an issue. We had an example we've used before is a guy who had a home with hardwood floors, and over time it had a lot of dogs and torn the heck out of the hardwood floor. The condition was very poor, and if he had put it on the market, that would have been a detraction from the sale. So we asked him for cost to cure. So for condition issues, cost to cure is really important. So go get an estimate. Tell us, to replace this hardwood floor would have been, $5,000, $10,000. And that's something we can take into consideration. It's not dollar for dollar, but it tells us, wow, there's something going on with this property. This value that we put out there is not accurately reflecting the property. One thing to note is we cannot accept appeals because of taxes. Taxes, won't cover that with a slide, is a complicated formula. It involves other parties other than us. We can only look at values. So usually if it comes in, there's not enough information for us to do anything with. So don't appeal on your taxes. So minimum requirements, people got the postcard, you can sign that, mail it back in and say my value's too high. That's all you'd have to do, sign and date it. Please don't do that, because it doesn't tell us enough about what the concern is. So the postcard doesn't give you a lot of room. You can try to fit something in there, or you can fill out a letter, you can email it or mail it to us. You can go onto our online appeal and give us more information, but the more information we have, the better we can recognize the differences in the properties. So we encourage you to do more than just sign and mail it in by June 8th. So what's appropriate to provide during an appeal? Sales. And we look for comparable, similar properties, but in this data collection period. So we're required to use the sales during this time, this 2-year period. For commercial property is usually where we go back 5 years, because there's just not that many sales. If somebody is looking at the current market, and I completely understand that the frustration is the market has shifted, we can't consider sales that occurred past June 30th, and that's in the statutes. So they need to do a look back to this period of time and find your comparables in that period of time. Cost to cure, I mentioned that. Let us know what it would cost if you have condition issues in the home. And photographs are great. Send us photos. You get photos of, cracked basement walls and damaged ceilings and all of that. We've sinking, we have some bentonite issues in parts of the county. We want to know that, and people will send us photographs. Super helpful. And then a fee appraisal, but it needs to be for a purchase or a refinance. It's not, there are other reasons to get appraisals, but particularly if your appraisal happened during this time, because that tells us a sense of maybe a little more detailed sense of the market at that time. And certainly we get a lot of stories, and we don't mind hearing people's stories about their home and the reasons they're concerned. There's some things we can't address, like you're on a fixed income. I can't change a house value because someone's on a fixed income. But we don't mind hearing from people and helping them walk through all of that. So we have a lot of tools. If you have a moment, go out to our website. We put way too much information out there, and we're aware it's overwhelming, but at the same time, it's all important stuff. If you want someone to walk you through it, please call our office. We'd be happy to take time to walk you through and get you to the important parts. On the main page, sort of in the middle, there's a red button that says your appeal process. That takes you to the page that has a lot of information. What it has out there is the sales analysis tool, which is new for us. It's a tool that allows you to go in with your account, your property ID, and find comparables. It's pretty easy to use. If not, there's a little help video linked up in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. We have comparable sales lists. We have the time trending sheets out there. You can see the time trending. There's all kinds of the appeal forms out there, all kinds of other forms in handouts and explanations. We just recently put out a form which is a little more complicated, or a page that just talks about the basics of mass appraisal. What is mass appraisal? Why do we do it? We have some tax estimation tools. And then the one that's out there that is not necessarily associated with the assessor's page, it's across the top bar of the county website, is the property search tool. And that is an individual. You can look up every property and look at the characteristics of the property. the great tools. But if it is overwhelming and you can't find your way, or you just want a one-on-one tutorial, give us a call. So how do you file an appeal? You can file it online, and on our website, there's a link that says file your appeal online. And you log in with your account and you fill out all the information. It sends you an email that says you've submitted an appeal. You can email it to us at assessor.bouldercounty.org. And we started this during COVID just because we needed people to have access to us because our office was shut to the public, but we've kept it going. So send us an email to this email address, give us your story, attach documents, and it's considered an appeal. And as long as we get it before midnight on the 8th, it's timely. You can send in the postcard form, or you can download or ask us to mail you or come by and pick up the full protest form. It can be mailed back to us, can be emailed to us. We have drop boxes both in Longmont and in Boulder, where if you have your packet and you don't want to mail it, you just want to run by and drop it in the drop box. One is on 14th Street, right across from the Boulder Theater. And then there's a drop box in Longmont at the county building on Kaufman. It's on the parking lot side of the building, and we pick those up regularly. Certainly our office is open. Come in and see us. We're open 7:30 to 5, Monday through Thursday. We have appraisers staffing the front counter. They're happy to walk you through, talk through, show you things. We still get faxes. We've actually gotten one fax this year. So we do have a fax number. So if someone's into faxes, send us a fax. We also have remote sites. So this week we're in Longmont. We have appraisers at the Longmont County office. They'll be there week after next. So next week we're in Lafayette at the same building where the clerk and recorder is in Lafayette. We have appraisers there. And then the week following we'll be back in Longmont at the county building. So if that's more convenient for people closer to home, take advantage of that. So how do we arrive at taxes? And this is why we don't take appeals for taxes. So we're responsible for setting the value, the market value, the actual value of the property. And when we do that every odd number year, we send that out. And the even number year, if nothing's changed on the property, the value stays the same, or we recognize the change. People can appeal every year, but that's all we're responsible for. As Ken mentioned, there's also an assessment rate, which is now the responsibility of the state legislature, and they've changed it. I think it's been ever since Gallagher, they've changed it. Every year we get a new assessment rate or set of them. So this is set by the legislature now. And then the next piece of the formula is the taxing jurisdictions, your districts, your county, the cities, fire districts, water districts, recreational districts, metro districts. They all have a mill levy, and they set that and give it to us. Well, here we'll go back. When that's all done, it gets handed to the treasurer by January 10th of every year. We deliver the tax roll to the treasurer, and the treasurer collects. So that's his responsibility. So we certified that all the special districts on the 25th of August and also on December 10th. We say, here's the value of all your properties in your district. The taxing entities take that data and they develop their budget. That is a public process. People can participate in it. I don't know when they meet. You would have to reach out to the districts and ask them. And I know that's frustrating because I'm in like 6 or 7 districts in my house. So how do I keep track of them all? But they are all, it is a public process and you'll have a right to comment on it and make sure that what they're levying for, the revenue they're collecting seems appropriate to you. And then on December 22nd, the county commissioners approve those levies, and then it gets put in the tax roll, and that's part of the taxes that we collect. So out on the county treasurer's site, there is a mill levy breakdown. So you can go out and look up your account or your customer's account, and you can see it's broken down. Every district actually has sub-districts in it. So Boulder County has all of these, and each of these, Health and Human Services, there's an abatement refund. So they have sub-districts within, but all of it's listed. And I don't know whose house this is, but I don't pay that much. But anyway, it gives you the amount to each of them in a total so that you can research it and look at it. So this is the map that went out in the news in late April that talks about Boulder County. So our median value increase was 35%. And believe it or not, that's kind of on the low end for the metro area. Most of the other districts or counties in the metro area had this or higher. And there is a map out there. It's on, I think it's on the Division of Property Taxation site. that shows the whole state, where you can click on different counties and see, what the different classifications went up. So the highest value increases we had were in the unincorporated plains, so the eastern part of the county, which is this lovely bluish purplish color out here. And that was 45% increase. Now you're talking median. So some are going to be lower, some are going to be higher. I live in Louisville. Ours was at 42%. And again, you think, well, what about the Marshall Fire? Didn't that impact it? Well, this is the basis. The basis for this was that 2-year period. And there were a lot of sales that happened in there before the fire that set this. So, and I'll come back around and talk about what we're doing with Marshall Fire properties and how their values were set. But so this is out on our website. This has been in the news. And it's just an anomalous period where everybody saw these increases across the state. I believe it's also across the country where there are huge increases in value, which makes it difficult on all of us. So I took for instance, so this is totally hypothetical. I took a house that was $520,000, and this is what people paid taxes for this year. So this year, for the 2022 taxes payable in 2023, the assessment rate was 6.95%. So only 6.95% is the $520,000 is what your taxes are calculated against. It gives you an assessed value. So this is where your taxes are calculated against. So you take the mill levy for the area, and this is a low mill levy, I know that, times the, oops, and I have a mathematical error. I apologize. This should be 36. Thought I fixed that. Times the mill levy, and it gives you, this number is right. I did check this. This was wrong before, and I fixed it, and now it's unfixed. So $3,100 basically in taxes. If it went up 35%, now that property is $800,000. There is a one-time reduction this year that the legislature put in last year of $15,000 off the actual value for every residential property. For commercial improved, there's a $30,000 reduction. And this is as it stands today. Our rate is now down to 6.765. So you only pay taxes on 6.765 of your value, your actual value. And when you times the mill levy, you do see an increase in taxes. But because of the change in the assessment rate and this one-time reduction for this year, your taxes are not as high as they would be. So it is about $800, $900 increase in taxes. And I apologize for the math errors. But so there is an increase, but the legislature is trying to reduce the impact of that. And so last year they passed a bill that moved the assessment rates all over the place and put these one-time reductions in value in place. So I'm going to pivot real quickly and talk about what's available to seniors. And I've got, and they're falling on the floor here, there's all kinds of pamphlets. These are all created by the Division of Property Taxation, and they explain all kinds of things. There's at least 3 up here that are on senior programs. One covers, well, we'll start, senior homestead exemption is one that my office manages. To qualify for it on the January 1 of the year you apply, you must be 65 years of age or older. You have to have lived in your home and owned it for at least 10 years prior to that January 1 date. What this does is it takes the first $100,000 of value of your home, and those taxes for that $100,000 are paid for you by the state. So the state pays that. So it's been between $400 and $700. So for a senior, that's helpful. So if you know anybody who qualifies with 65, been an owner occupant for 10 years, by January 1 of this year, please ask them to contact our office, or we've got the applications out on our website, and get that into us by July 15th. Pardon? No income measure on this at all. This is purely based on age and length of residence in your home. You have to apply by July 15th. There is a second deadline that you can apply by August 15th, but if you apply between July 15th and August 15th, you don't have the right of appeal, because you can appeal. If we deny it, you can go to a hearing officer and say, you shouldn't have denied my senior exemption for these reasons. So you want to get in by July 15th so that we can tell you if you're approved or denied, and then you go to hearing if you need to. The disabled veterans exemption and the Gold Star spouses. Gold Star spouse was new as of last year. These are actually currently managed by the Veterans Administration. You apply to them, they look at you, you need to be 100% disabled through a service-related injury. You have to be honorably discharged, and there's some ownership, length of ownership requirements as well. And their deadline is a little earlier, it's July 1st. But again, they need to contact the Veterans Administration for that. And the flyer up here has all the information on that. Gold Star spouses, of course, are the surviving spouse of somebody who was killed in action. It's the same program. The only downside of that is that they lose that if they remarry. So, and again, that's explained up here. Senior tax deferral used to be handled by our county treasurer. It's now a state program. This allows you to year by year defer your taxes. So, and a very low interest rate, it does put a lien on your property. So it's one of those where you need to think, I know if my dad needed help with his taxes, I would rather pay them than have him put a lien on his property. But not everybody's in that position. So it allows you at a very low interest rate to borrow money from the state to pay your taxes. It is year by year. So if I needed it this year because I was ill and I just didn't have the money, I could defer this year, but I don't have to defer next year. So it's a great program. And I think the interest rate is around 4%. So for a loan, that's not bad. But again, it's the state of Colorado. If you have question, our county treasurer has run this program. He's happy to talk to people about it. So Paul Weissman is a great person to contact. He and his staff know a great deal about the program. The next two, the property tax rent and heat and LEAP programs, are state programs that help people with income restrictions cover heating costs, covering rent, things like that. So, but there is income restrictions on it. So you have to be, pretty much at the poverty level to avail yourself of those. But for those who need it, those are great programs. The last one is a program that is available to any taxing jurisdiction. The county has this program in place, and a senior who is 65, I think it's 65 years of age, can be hired by the county to work the number of hours it takes to pay off the county portion of the taxes. So we're looking at hiring a couple of these folks. One of them can work 56 hours. They're paid at the state minimum wage, which is just under $14 an hour. They do remove para from it, which is unfortunately because we're a para employer. So they have I'm assuming they get that refunded back from para. But they come in and help us. So we need help with our handling of appeals. We need somebody to help us get things logged, scanned, all that. And these folks, I actually have two who asked to work in our office, which is unusual, and we want to take advantage of that, right? So it's a great program. Parks and Open Space hires a lot of people. They hire people to come in and help in the gardens around the county buildings. Some folks come back because it's just nice to have something purposeful, to be around people, and they're great help, great help. So again, county commissioners are who they reached out to for that program. So I was going to remove all these, but these are all the same slides that are in here. I didn't want to take up your time with all of them, but all these pamphlets have them. So before we end, I want to touch on two things. So can I take a question? Okay. Legislation. So the legislature just ended their session Monday night. One of the things they voted in, and the governor will sign, I'm sure, here sometime this summer, is it was Senate Bill 303. And what it did was it's going to put something on the ballot this fall. And it's an extensive set of things that are going to happen. But basically, the ballot language will say, will you agree to extend monies to cover, to deal with property tax issues? If that's approved, all the things in this bill and a companion bill go into place. So the things that I'm remembering that are in this bill, it makes the senior exemption portable, so that, which is not portable now. When I sell my house, I have to start the whole clock over. This bill makes that senior, if it passes, if we all vote yes, it makes the senior program portable. It sets the assessment rates that we saw come down over the last few years. It puts them on a 10-year plan to reduce over time. And then I think it's in year either 2031 or 32, the legislature has to come back and do something about it. Has some language about what taxing districts have to do to be transparent with their whole mill levy setting process. It also puts in place a program that, if voted in, I'll have to figure out how to do, and that's establishing who's a primary owner on a home, distinguishing a primary owner from if you own like an investment property or a second home. The reason for that is so that we can track seniors as they move. So if it's your primary residence, it was my home, I moved, now this is my home, I have to have a way to track it. So there's a lot more in the bill. It's this lengthy thing, but it's something to watch for over the summer and the fall. I'm sure it'll be in the news. There'll be a lot out there, but it's the legislature's attempt to help with next year's property bills and property taxes into the future. So I don't know if there'll be other ballot things on the ballot, but just something to watch for. It's a pretty big item for all of us who are property owners. It has a companion bill that if this bill that works with property taxes passes, it establishes the Tabor refund as sort of one flat fee for a single person and a flat fee for more than one person. So, and I think it's $650 and $1,300. So anyway, watch for those. Legislature's over. We'll just have to see where it goes over the summer. And then real quickly, I wanted to talk about Marshall Fire, and then I'll start taking questions. So there's a pamphlet up here about what we are required to do with properties destroyed by natural disasters, by natural causes. So what the law said was that that fire was right at the end of the year in 2020. So it says that for the year that you have lost to a natural cause, the state will backfill the taxes for the lost improvements. So all the houses, the state paid the taxes in 2021. So those people only paid for the land. On January 1, as Ken said, we look at the condition and classification of property, and we went out to the Marshall Fire properties, and they were highly damaged. They had basements they couldn't reuse. They needed soil remediation. So based on a cost process that the state provides us, we looked at it and said, these properties are worth 50% of what they were worth. The land was worth 50% of what it was worth before the fire. So their 2023 tax bill that they're just paying now was for 50% of the land value of 2022. So they got a really big break there because it wouldn't have sold for what, I mean, a piece of property like that just would not have sold in the market. So we reduced it. This year, because it's a reappraisal year and the properties have been remediated, and we're hoping if any property owner has not had their property remediated, i.e. the basement pulled out, the soil cleaned and all of that, that they let us know that. But our understanding from the county was that there was a program that came in place and property owners could engage with that program to have that done for them. And so our understanding is that got done for all the properties. So all those properties came back to a 100% value. It was buildable lot. It's clean dirt, no basement pulled out, has utilities at the street. So we put them back at 100%. They then had to be revalued. So we went through a process. It's a method under the market valuation process that we're allowed to use. It's called either allocation or extraction. So we took their 100% value of home and we took land. We took their home from 2021 as it stood, which no longer is there, but we took that value and we put it on the land. And we ran it through our models, saying here's what it would have been had it not been destroyed. And then because we can identify the components of the home, what everything contributes to value. So what is a garage? What is a building? What is view? All of those things. We took all that value back off. So what they have is the land value reappraised. And we're hearing from a lot of those property owners. So they saw they were at 50% and suddenly they're at 100% plus. And that's why, is we had to revalue them. We have to put them in the market and compare against the market. And the only way we could do that was to pretend they were full properties again. Now, many of these properties will, when they're 100%, are going to be much higher value homes than what they had before. I live out there and some of these houses are huge that they're building. They're really rebuilding beautiful, beautiful homes and taking advantage of this opportunity to rebuild. Though I also know it's incredibly painful, sad, hard thing to go through and very frustrating for these property owners. But that just gives you a thumbnail of what we did. We did put them through and compare them to the market based on sort of splitting the land and the building out. So, and we are hearing from them. We have had several meetings with Marshall Fire people. We're happy to talk to anybody who's struggling with that. And again, we're providing every bit of information we can out to them so they can understand what's going on. Yes. Yes, that's a good question. No, fine. Sure. Sure. So I would say, remember the data collection period. So one of the things that, and we consider you guys partners in this, one of the things people will come to you for is comparable. Remember that 2-year data collection period, because we really can't consider a sale outside of it. The only caveat to that is if something was under contract prior to June 30th of 2022, closed afterward, we can consider contract sales. But we have to see that they had a contract in place before we can use that sale. And we try to catch those. We don't always see contract dates. But we do an adjusted, right. So and Kim can talk to you. And is it okay if I go off and talk about it? Sure. So time adjustment is looking at the change in value or sales prices over time in that two-year period. And we calculate that. And those are available on the website. So we've got them out there where you can see them for every month, what the adjustment is. And it allows you to look to what that value, it establishes what that property's value would have been on June 30th, 2022. You can also go look, those sold properties are properties in our county. So you can go look on our sales list and see the adjusted sale price. So we have sales lists out on our website, and it includes adjusted sale price on it. So avail yourself of those. So I think that's the first thing is remember the sales that we can use. The second is if there's condition issues, if there's anything you can do to help the property owner explain to us why that property should be looked at differently. That's a big deal. You can submit as many as you like. 3 is sort of a minimum, but more than that. Or if we're talking to Marshall Fire people this week, there's not a lot of comparables for land sales out there. So they may only find one. And what we're asking them to do is tell us about that one and tell us why it's different. It might be across McCaslin in a nicer neighborhood with a view. And I'm over in this neighborhood and I don't have that view. So I think there's 20 to 30 sales maybe that happen, land sales. We're working on that, and hopefully by next week I'll have that on the website where people can download the Marshall Fire sales list. But it's tough. Right. Okay. Mhm. Mhm. So unfortunately, we look at the sales and during that data collection period, and if we can't see any reason to disqualify it, it's included in our models. So if that was the market, we have to reflect that. So if it were super anomalous, like someone paid $100,000 for a $600,000 property, we would catch that and say there's something going on here, right? Mhm. Right, right.
The ratio study should show us that. Because the ratio studies don't specifically consider that atypical kind of situation. They consider the sales alone. And so we should have seen a complete rise like it's on a graph. We didn't see the hiccup that you're talking about. We didn't it could have been because of the sales. There weren't as many sales that would pull it. But we have to go with the mass. And if we don't see enough that impact in that data collection period, then it may not be caught. That's the only thing I'd say about that.
We actually saw a downward trend starting in about April, and that was recognized in our models that we started to see sales soften, and it was noticeable in the market. So April through June, we did see that happen countywide. So it's about 50%. Yep. So 50-50. So yeah. And the more information we have, the better the chance. So you've had your hand up for a while. property specific. On taxes, the problem with estimating taxes is we won't know the mill levy until December. So we do have an estimate of taxes out on the full notice of value that's on our website, but it's the new value looking at last year's levy, because I don't know what the levy will be, so. Mhm. That may be true. When you look at the assessment rate, which is, 6, 7% of the total value, and then the mill levy, it may have only been that. So residences don't get taxed as at a higher rate like commercial does. So it's really a very small portion of your market value that's taxed. So that may be why. If you take 150,000 off of something, it may not have been enough to be a huge reduction. So, yes, ma'am. Mhm. One, only one. Whichever's her primary residence. So if she's living in one, she's switching between. Okay. So she needs to pick one where maybe it's the address she gets her bills at or whatever. She needs to pick one. And the other thing is there's some honesty around this. So I wouldn't, if she doesn't tell me, I wouldn't know. She just needs to pick a house. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the law doesn't allow us to recognize both. So she just needs to decide which one she wants to have and certainly apply. And don't tell us about the second house. Pardon? Sure. Mhm. I think that's a personal decision. Yeah. And because of the residential rate, the assessment rate, the impact on taxes is not huge. You can imagine a commercial property that's at what, almost 28% of their actual value. When they appeal, there's a big change in their taxes. And we see a lot of those. Well, residential, I think they'd have to do the math and say, do I want to? Possibly, it depends on the market. So we're almost halfway through the next data collection period. Has softened. We are seeing things, not like they were 2 years ago. And that'll be reflected in the next notices that come out in 2025. Yeah. Send it in. Let us look at it. We'll take that into.
It's openly considered, but I'm just. So we look at it open eye. We'll look at it open eyed. Any information is better than no information. But the reality is to make it equitable and reasonable and uniform, it should have the time adjustment that's been recognized within that area, within that neighborhood. And then it'd take it up to the same point, same appraisal date to really be comparable to the valuation.
Sure. Right. It, I'm supposed to keep that information confidential because seniors get profile. So it's not something I can put out and say, here's the list. So There is no impact to the value of the property. It's just on the tax side. Okay. Mhm. So the values that are out there, we arrived at through modeling, through our regression modeling, and it's all based on that data collection period. And that was when the hottest market was. So that's why you're seeing things go up so much. There's no other, we're doing it like we've always done it. So there's no other thing happening on our side that would make those values seem out of line or different. It's all based on the market that we're working with.
I'd say we don't set the market. We actually interpret what the market's telling us. And so if the market's telling us that and supply and demand or whatever impacts the value at that time, we have to recognize it. Otherwise, that's the only way we can be uniform and equitable is to do it the appropriate way and also pass the audit and make sure we treat people as fairly as we can. And so it may or may not have an impact. Once again, we have to look at the market as to that period of time. And we see trends one way or the other and influencing characteristics that we've captured. Yeah, just like you with a commercial, we still go back to the market, but it's not, it's heterogeneous rather than homogeneous. There's a lot of intangibles that may or may not be captured. So what's typically here office maybe have something different that wasn't truly captured by the same sale. So that's why specific income approach is more appropriate for non-residential, and that is an allowable approach. So that's what I'd encourage.
Oh, no. Okay, sorry. I will do that. I apologize. One thing to note about commercial, we are required to set our values using market, and we don't have the income information. That's why we ask appeal and share your income information with us. And it is valid for us to look at income. We can also use cost. Cost really works best on a new building, not on an old building. Can't figure that out. But so we establish those based on market, knowing that we don't have the income information that we're going to hear from a lot of commercial property owners. Okay, yeah. So I'll try to paraphrase, but your question about mill levies and are we aware of changes or have we seen changes over time? And a mill levy can only go up if there's a vote of the people, and that's Tabor. Tabor says you can't increase taxation without a vote of the people. So we see it around here. If you kids in the school, we're always voting on school bonds, and that's an increase to our levy, and we vote for it. So they can't just go out and increase a levy without letting you know, and those are on your ballot. Yes. I think am I done? Sure. Yep. Yep. It's yeah, absolutely important to know what's on your ballot and to make, smart decisions about your ballot.
I just add there's an inflationary component built in because it costs to provide those services. It costs more, so there's an allowance of a amount like even schools, 5.5% plus inflation is part of the legal ability for them to raise.
It's not part of our thing. And still, even though they're allowed to raise their revenue, they can't raise it without a vote. They can say, like the county has a 5.5% limit, and they can contemplate a budget that goes up that much, but they still have to come to you, the citizen, to say, can we do it? So it's all on your ballot. So, just be aware, look for the blue books and green books or whatever those things are out there that do the pros and cons, and, make wise decisions when you vote. Yes, ma'am. Right. Gallagher is focused on repeat the question. What is Gallagher's impact on all of this? So the Gallagher Amendment used to establish, when this part was in place, the assessment rate. And so it's not the value, it's the amount of the value that is used for taxation. So Gallagher, all that we repealed in Gallagher was that 45-55% balance between residential and all other. And that's the assessment rate. The legislature handles that now.
I'd encourage people to go ahead and look at our information. It hasn't really, the base comparative, it has not shifted that much so far. There's some misrepresentation, in my opinion, of the impact on current assessed actual taxes. So just look for yourself, kind of see the difference. And if you need more information, I have annual report information from the State Division of Property Taxation. Give you the link and give you the page.
And the legislature has done nothing but reduce the assessment rate. I haven't seen it come up ever in my tenure. So it's lower now than it's ever been. So you have a few questions. Yeah, if we can capture them.
So here's a couple, I think. So this is a really good one right here. And then this
Okay.
right here is talking about what Rachel was mentioning earlier about typically historically we've been a little bit under market for the assessed, and now we're hitting market if not over it. And kind of talking about that model. Maybe
Okay.
how that has to change at the same time.
Right. So the first question, historically, the assessor's property valuation have typically been 15 to 20% below true market. 2023 assessor valuations come in close to market value or above, some cases 20 to 40% over market values. What's the reason for this and now? And my first question is, are you looking at current market? In which case, yes, there's a difference because we have to look into the past. We're not looking at the sales that have happened since June 30th, 2022. And what we do is reflect the market. So if it's coming in, I don't recall things coming in low. It's always been off of median, some high, some low. So I don't know if you have something you can add to this, Kenna. I don't think that.
I think the only thing I'd add is based on how the modeling is done, we do look for the extreme ratios. We look at the highs and the lows, and we have to double check, really scrutinize before we set those values and the contributory value adjustments. We actually open-eyed look at those ratios that are all over. That's why the COD, how dispersed it is. We look at the highs and lows as well as any atypical stuff to try to get rid of that type of valuation influence.
Right. Okay. Okay. How do we use time trends? Ken, do you want to talk to people? How do we use time trends to help property owners?
That'll take a really long time, and I know we're already beyond the time. I encourage anyone who has more questions about that, my information, make sure you reach out. Emails are easiest because I'm being bombarded by meetings, but feel free to go ahead and reach out to me. I'll give you more details. Also, I can give you the link on the website and other information. But basically, time trends, once again, are ratios over time, measuring market conditions over that time. And so each ratio represents a relationship. And the assumed market value, last reappraisal cycle, June 30th, 2020, is compared against actual sales that have occurred, market value, about data collection period, and we're trying to move it from here to one period of time. It sold here for this much. If it had sold here, what does the market tell you would have been selling for?
Okay, a question here. A specific question, this person does a lot of ag properties in Boulder County. Moving forward, are horse boarding facilities no longer categorized as ag and have been reassessed as commercial properties? Statutorily, it went to the Court of Appeals. Horse boarding properties are not agricultural. And this is something that we missed in our county, and we have moved a lot of horse boarding properties. Not the whole property, it's based on how the property is used. So if they still have some portions of the property that are used for, say, growing hay or other crops, we recognize the agricultural portion of the county, of the parcel, but the part that's used for horse boarding is commercial. And we're just cleaning up our records, so we do know that we have a bunch of property owners in the county that have been through this. Sure. Okay, Ken. So here's a question. Sometimes there's an outlier. An example is 1 in 4 total comps the county used is an extreme outlier. If my client sends in 3 or more similar homes, what will be taken into consideration to lower the value somewhat?
Well, all information that's provided is taken into consideration. I think in a nutshell, give us everything you have, and then we will go ahead and open-eyed look at it and see if there's relevant data. And there's subjectivity with everything, but our appraisers have opinions of value, and they look at consistencies, data, and open-eyed try to evaluate.
So we're gonna start wrapping it up shortly, but there's one last question that I think is really interesting. So I want to read that out.
Sure. Hi, I would love to ask how this impacts properties that are currently under contract. Can a buyer who is not yet an owner appeal the valuation based on the appraisal completed prior to owning the property? You have to be an owner or a prior owner. You could talk to the current owner and ask them, and actually have a commercial property that's doing this. The current owner is filing knowing that the property is going to sell, and that they're actually using the buyer's agent to do this. So you have to either be the owner or either previous owner during this year or the current owner. So the tentative buyer could ask the seller to file for them.
And or you can do the abatement, and that's where you could put all the information together and just have them send it in as well on the practicality side. And kind of with this, if you have additional questions, right here we have that information. So you reach out to Kendra Sidney, and they can help answer any additional questions you have. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up because I know people need to get moving. But thank you so much for listening in and attending. We really hope you found this information helpful, and you'll be able to share this with your clients and get the word out on how we can help our clients out there in the market if they need to protesting their property taxes. So thank you too. Really appreciate your time. And with that, we'll wrap it up. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. And you guys on Zoom, I will do my best to get you guys the handout and send it out to you guys via email. All right. All right, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.